Greetings and welcome to Your Place on the River, a podcast brought to you by Carriage Kia of Woodstock, Georgia, and featuring Chattahoochee Nature Center, where our mission is to connect people with nature. CNC is a private, nonprofit 501c3 organization supported by our members, community at large, and listeners like you. To learn more about Chattahoochee Nature Center, visit chatnaturecenter.org. To comment on this podcast, tweet us at CNC Nature and use hashtag YPOTR. I'm Larry Stevens, a naturalist here at Chattahoochee Nature Center, joined by co-host Scott Tracy, our friendly field guide.
Well, hey, Larry. Thanks for letting me inside.
Well, we'll see how you behave. Today we're going to hear a special raptor rehabilitation story. But Scott, who are we meeting first? What can you tell us about him?
Well, today we are talking to Henning von Schmeling, our horticultural conservationist. Did I do it? No, I had it backwards. Our conservationist horticultural...
Conservation horticulturist.
Oh, thanks, Henning.
You're
Perfect.
welcome.
Yes. Yeah, a title you've received because of your heavy focus on conservation of our native plants here in the Southeast. But you're not from the Southeast. You are from Germany.
That's correct.
And you came here with your parents when you were young. But how did you find the Nature Center?
On a map.
Yes.
We lived in Sandy Springs near
Thank goodness
the
for
two
maps.
big towers there, the King and Queen Tower. And I used to go to a nature center in Washington, D.C. when we lived there. I would get off the school bus and basically told a fib to my mom that I didn't have any homework, and then got on my bike and rode to the local nature center and spent the rest of the day there. So here, it looked close on a map, so I hopped on my bicycle, rode it all the way to the nature center, and found that the Chattahoochee River, there were piles and piles of construction debris. At that point, there was a building boom in this area, lots of new neighborhoods being built, including the one that surrounds us. And the contractors didn't want to pay the fee at the landfill. They just back it up to the river and dump it into the river. So I got to the nature center and wanted to talk to the director and tell him that it's a shame what he allows them to do. His name was Bruce Lund. We talked for a little bit, left his office, came back with a pair of work gloves, the key to the nature center truck, and a hand-drawn map to the local landfill, and said, do something about it. And I did. So that's how I started volunteering at the nature center. And within about a year, I was hired part-time
Nice.
as a janitor.
Yeah. Cool to hear that you, much like myself and many other people here, got started as a volunteer. This place just kind of attracts people with a passion to do this, sometimes hard work. It's labor of love.
Yep.
So how long ago was that, Henning?
Almost 40 years ago.
Almost 40 years.
I've been working here now. This is my 38th year.
You've seen a few changes.
Lots of changes.
For example?
From having a gravel parking lot down by the street to a recycling center to the old Discovery Center or Nature Center down below. Admissions was recommended, but not necessary. You would put like 2 quarters, 50 cents in a clear plastic box, drop it in when you walked in, but was not necessary. Back then, we did not teach according to the curriculums from the school, so there was more free play, a lot more just hike through the woods and see what you can find, and that's about it. And now we're very professional about that. We develop curriculum. The butterfly garden, beaver habitat, and Georgia's living wetlands, all three were open in the same within 7 months of each other. That was a very, very busy year. That must have been like in the real early 90s that we opened those up. And the Discovery Center was built in 2008 and 9. Maintenance building and wildlife department, new buildings were built in 2007, 2008. The Unity Garden, I think we started in 2008 as well, which is a 1/4-acre vegetable garden, and all the produce that is grown there is donated to North Fulton Community Charities for needy families in the area. And the clients are very appreciative of the fresh produce. For example, what was harvested this morning is probably already gone off the shelf.
Wow.
It goes very fast. No fresher food available at the grocery store.
And back when you started here, we did not have 127 acres.
That is correct. We had about 100 when I started.
Yeah.
Because shortly before I started working here, this upper section was purchased. And then the last piece of the puzzle was the piece over here with the camp buildings and the pool on that side.
Right. And a lot of those 100 acres is still our forested section of the property.
There's about 42 acres across the street with our brand spanking new boardwalk. That's a really nice amenity. It's brought a lot of people out. It's really increased membership. And I've got ADD. There's a tiger swallowtail, nature deficit disorder. A lot of people
Georgia
come
State
out.
butterfly.
Yep. A lot of people come out to walk that in the mornings. They really enjoy it along the banks of the Chattahoochee River. Any of you have not been out here, springtime's one of the most beautiful times out here, with things coming into bloom and all the wildlife is active.
So we've really grown in a way of organization, of education, and all driven a lot by charitable community funding.
Yes, we have. The community has been very, very generous over the years. We have certain foundations that have really supported us for many, 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 many years and helped us grow to where we are now.
You talked about, I believe, the fact not only we added staff, but we've become more professionally driven and led. Is that correct?
Well, we definitely are running this more like a business now. We do have strategic plan that we go by. There's certain aspects. Once a year, the senior staff gets together and they look at the goals and see which ones they met, which ones they need to scale back. Why did this not work? How can we change that? We used to do everything under the sun. We did so many different programs over the years that we didn't do any of them really well. But now we have certain things that we do, like our school programs. Definitely, they are really, really top-notch programs that we teach here. Larry, you should know that since you're one of the naturalists that teaches them. So, I mean, we've added concerts by the river. We've added sunset sips. These are more for adult programming in the summertime for people to come out and enjoy the grounds after hours, because that's when a lot of wildlife becomes active. And it's still connecting people to nature because you're outdoors, you're walking around, you're looking at flowers, you're looking at wildlife.
Did we even have that mission statement when you started here?
No, we did not. Okay. Ours was like 40 words long back then.
Of course.
So you distilled it to connecting people with nature.
Yeah, so that's a much better, short, concise, and very broad, if you think about it. I mean, the Unity Garden is a vegetable garden, but we're still connecting people to nature because they're outdoors, they're working in the soil, they hear the birds calling.
Oh, sure.
Native plant sales.
We added that when I started here.
Yeah, and that brings me to what I wanted to talk to you more about here today was your conservation work. And specifically, we'll start with the roots of that, which is how you got interested in the native landscape here in the first place.
Well, I got interested in gardening thanks to my dad.
Right.
So that was step number one. You have to have some kind of an interest for soil and plants and flowers and all that. And then there were 4 people that I met within the first 6 to 12 months living in the States that have really nurtured me, took me under their wing. One of them was Tom Patrick. He was our first state botanist hired by the Department of Natural Resources. Cool. He was a very, very nice man. And then there was this gang of 3 people about my same age, Alan Kressler, Rob Gardner, and Steve Bowling. And I still stay in touch with all 3 of them. I lost touch with them for a little bit while my kids were growing up, but then kids grow up, and then you have time.
Yeah.
But they really helped me out, identifying, learning how to key out things. I already had some information and knowledge of horticulture and botany because I did a landscape apprenticeship in Germany for 3 years and learned a lot there. And Latin in high school helped too.
For those binomials.
4 years of Latin. You can edit that out.
Yeah, nobody wants to talk Latin anymore.
Dead language.
Right.
For a lot of people, conservation horticulture you might jump straight to the rarest of the rarest. But if I'm growing milkweed plants that are fairly common and they get planted throughout Atlanta, we're helping conserve the monarch butterfly.
Oh, yeah.
So that's conservation at its best as well. So it could be something common that has a purpose.
Oh, of course.
Our native plant sales, they have a purpose. We want people to turn their yards from a garden that is primarily European and Asian to plants that actually came from here and not from around the world.
Right. Well, common or not, anything in place of the invasive plants, diminishing our biodiversity. I had somebody, or I suppose I read somewhere, biodiversity can be likened to spokes on a bicycle wheel. If each spoke is a species, the more spokes that you take out, sure, the wheel will continue to maintain and be fine for a little while, but at some point you take out enough spokes and it starts to crumble. That's how our whole ecosystem is kind of based. The more
That's a good analogy.
more species we lose, the more problems we're going to have. So, yeah. So you've taken that to the next level by trying to save plants specifically that are on their way out. And of course, that corresponds with bugs that correspond with the plants as well.
That's correct. So currently we're working with about 35 to 40 of our most critically endangered plant species in the state of Georgia, 5 of which we have a contract with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for, to grow, to propagate, to create duplicate collections that then will be housed at different locations. We have grown plants in the past that have been successfully planted back out in the wild that are now actually propagating themselves, that they're recruiting seedlings. And that's really the ultimate goal of rare plant conservation.
Sure.
We can plant it anywhere and it might grow, but if it doesn't reproduce, you failed.
Right.
So they have to keep genetics going. They have to keep that, there's always going to be some losses due to age of a plant. So by that time, they need to have already produced a whole bunch of offspring that can sustain the population.
And you spend a lot of time off campus here in the field finding and replanting.
Yeah, as much as I can, yes. Yeah. This time of the year, not so much because of the native plant sale, because it's really busy up there. But I try to get out in the fields as often as I can to look for plants, look for populations. With the blessings of the Georgia Department of Natural Resources, we can get a letter of agreement where I can collect seeds or cuttings or divisions and then bring them back, propagate them. And then just a couple of weeks ago, DNR picked up about 100 milkweed plants of a subspecies that was only known from one population in Georgia. And I collected cuttings from that population, and now they can't find the population. So the genetic material that I have is all that's left of that milkweed.
Okay.
Wow. You've gained all this knowledge mostly through, or I suppose strictly through, no college experience.
That is correct. I love reading. I don't like fiction. Keys are great, botany books, vascular floras. Having the right friends makes a difference as well.
Right.
They took me under their wings and helped tremendously. I mean, in the beginning here, almost every single weekend was spent somewhere out in the field. Mm-hmm. We would go somewhere. This was not even part of my job back then.
Right.
So, as you gain knowledge botanically, I know I come to you whenever I have a question regarding invertebrates. Mm-hmm. So
I used to be an insect collector, okay, and then I went into insect breeding and releasing. Instead of putting a stainless steel pin through their bodies, okay, I actually raised them up to release them back into the wild.
Yeah.
And I've traveled to several countries in South America looking for insects, and that was always a lot of fun in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
All the communication you had was a satellite phone.
When you came as a volunteer, and then we were a janitor, and then what other titles have you added over the years? Gardener, as you've expanded your knowledge.
Gardener, handyman. like this table here I built for this conference room. Mm-hmm. This was a tree we had to cut down by the beaver habitat. The legs was a tree that died on the boardwalk. But
that was just out of the good of your heart.
But you were the head of the horticulture.
I was
operations.
I was horticulture, then senior director of operations, and now I am not a senior director anymore. I just do conservation horticulture.
I believe you told me that's your dream job.
Well.
Huh?
I sleep well at night.
Because I got your dream job.
Yeah. Well, I always keep telling younger people that at some point after 38 years, you might get your dream job. Just stick at it.
Good.
Yeah.
Stick with it.
Yeah, you just got to stick with it. Exactly. Again, I think your tale kind of speaks a lot to the experience over, I guess, like formal education, because That's my opinion on things. If you want to be interested in something, you kind of have to throw yourself into a group of people that are already doing it and just spend time with them.
You've done the same thing. I mean, with mushrooms and other things, growing houseplants and cacti and all that kind of stuff at home.
Yeah, I mean, I threw myself into the nature center.
Yep.
It's same thing, you know. It's going to spit me out soon.
Well, watch
I'll
out.
be wiser.
Henning also has his carnivorous plants. I've got a couple of bogs that he's helped me build. And, they've survived the winter.
I used to grow a lot more diversity of carnivorous plants. I used to have sun pitchers from South America and sundews from South Africa and tropical pitcher plants from Southeast Asia. And at one point, I just couldn't do it anymore. It was just, every year when I had to repot, it would be like $4,500 to $5,000 in soil. That's very expensive. We're crazy people, carnivorous plant people. But I donated, if you go to the Atlanta Botanical Garden, to the Highland House, a lot of those Nepenthes and the sun pitchers came from me. I donated those to them.
That's my favorite house in the whole botanical garden.
Especially in the summertime when it's 60 degrees in there.
Yeah, well, you just get in there and the air is a little different, because they're trying to recreate the high altitude, and you say,
Someday I'll tell you how they do that.
Okay.
Not on tape.
I'm about to get a house. If I can replicate that there, I won't leave it. That's cool. So, of all the places that you go and do your conservation work, you don't have to give out any specific coordinates, as you said that you will not do. But do you have like a favorite place that you're out there? I know you told me you really like the Ohoopee Dunes.
Ohoopee Dunes I really like. It's a very different landscape. It looks almost like a moon landscape.
That's cool.
Pure white sands about 150, 200 feet down in the ground. It has oak trees that typically will get 50, 60, 70 feet tall. In that environment, they might get 8 feet tall because it's so dry and nutrient poor. There's also some really nice seepage slopes with a lot of orchids and carnivorous plants. The state of Georgia and the Nature Conservancy, they have done a great job acquiring pretty much every single parcel of land that was available along the Hoopee River, and it's now fully protected.
Is that a place any old regular fella can go visit?
There's a public trail that has markers and a brochure and gopher tortoises. They talk about gopher tortoises. They talk about there's a newt in one of the ponds that they have built a small boardwalk with a deck that you can see the pond, but you might not find the newts.
Right.
But it's a really interesting habitat. Every 3 to 5 years, they actually put fire on the ground, burn it all up. The habitat loves it. It comes back stronger than ever before.
Right.
It's between Swainsboro and Statesboro.
Okay.
No.
Betweensboro.
Statesboro
It's
Blues.
west of Swainsboro. Sorry.
Okay.
But the public trails advertised. You can go there and walk around. I would not recommend to go in July and August.
Of course.
But springtime, like right now, there should be a lot of things in bloom.
Right on.
It must be really gratifying, though, for you to have seen how the public is excited over the past decades of wanting to connect with nature and wanting to support the kind of things that you're taking the lead with.
The last 10 to 15 years have really, really made a huge difference in rare plant conservation. The Nature Center was a founding member about 25, 30 years ago of the Georgia Plant Conservation Alliance, which is based at the State Botanical Garden. It is sometimes described as a herd of cats that needs a cheerleader to get them all together, because we have people from corporations, we have people from universities, we have people from nature centers, we have just a whole bunch of different people from all different kinds of walks of lives. But for rare plant conservation, we get together. And it's really, I always love the 3 meetings a year that we have. To see some people you hadn't seen in 3 months or 4 months. We just had our project meeting to see what we're going to do this coming year with this project species that we're involved with. So does it need fire? Can we propagate some, put some back out? Can we locate some more habitat where more plants can be put out on protected land? Because some of these populations are on private land. They might have a conservation easement, they might have an informal agreement with the landowner, but so often I have seen this, once the parents who were really into it pass away, a lot of times the kids start selling it off. And then you don't know what kind of protection you're going to get on the land. So the other thing that has happened, as I mentioned earlier, Tom Patrick was the first botanist that the state of Georgia hired. And I think they're up to like 10 now, 11 botanists in the state. So the state has really put some money on the table to get some more people through it. State of Georgia is very large when you only have one person that has to check on 400 plant species every 3 to 5 years. It's almost impossible. So they've divided it up into regions now. The 400 species number is from every 3 to 5 years, they track all these species. So this year they might do 75, next year another 75. But they visit every single known occurrence for that species and assess if that population is viable. If it's not, does it need something? So they have to do that. And when you have 400 species that you're tracking for one person, that's impossible.
So it's encouraging that making this effort to expand it and get done what has to be done.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of red tape, too, involved with it.
Welcome to the government.
Government. But they're good people. They're good-hearted. They want to do the right things. They are very supportive of what we do here. Yeah. One of them, Mincy Moffett, he's now moved on to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. He always said that Henning is such a good grower that he can root a pencil. He can root a pencil into a tree.
Wow.
Quite an accolade.
No.
Lead and all.
Not possible.
Oh, really? Yeah, so that was something I was kind of curious about. Are there any plants that you found particularly difficult to grow, whether it be from seed, from cuttings, just however it has to be? Are there ones that you've just had not a lot of success with? And
yes, there's always failures.
Sure.
You got to figure that out.
But maybe there's one species in mind that sticks out.
Well, I try to grow, it's a horrible name. It's called Georgia Bully.
Oh, yeah.
Cider oxalant thorny eye. It's a state protected species. Only like 5 populations in Georgia left. We grew it here. I collected seeds every year, tried to germinate them, different techniques, cold stratification, different soils, fire, smoke. Nothing worked.
Smoke.
Oh, believe it or not, there are plants that will only germinate after a fire because of the smoke.
Huh.
Which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But I found this obscure paper online from China that was actually translated into German. So it was very easy for me to read. And they had a related shrub species, very closely related to what we have here. And they actually used a 20% solution of sulfuric acid.
Of course.
For about 15-minute bath.
Why didn't we think of that?
And then within 3 weeks, they germinated every single one.
Weird.
Stomach acids, birds.
Yeah.
Oh,
Pitcher plants.
okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I couldn't just go to the pharmacy and pick up a jar of sulfuric acid, so I had to beg
So
and
you would
plead
eat
from
them.
a chemistry lab. Luckily, I have friends in low places that are willing to share.
We chatted with Jacqueline McCrae a couple of episodes ago, and we talked about the importance of biodiversity and trying to eliminate invasive non-native plants. What do you have to add to that?
Well, it's very unfortunate that so many plants that are being grown in nurseries and in yards will at some point turn into something invasive. Either they produce seeds or berries, or they're just very prolific growers, and they have almost nothing that keeps them in check. There's no insect pests or no diseases that they might encounter back home. But we're not the only ones that have the issue. When I go to Germany, I see the Canada goldenrod everywhere, which is something we gave them. So it's not just the U.S. getting them or Canada getting them. They're going all over the world, everything. That saying of grass is greener on the other side, that's exactly what the horticulture industry is doing.
Right.
Hey, this stuff from China is much better.
Yeah.
No pests, no diseases.
Maybe eventually it'll just have traded all the way over.
No biodiversity and food desert for our wildlife.
Yeah. So biodiversity is very, very important, and that's where, the state of Georgia fully understands that in state parks and wildlife management areas, and they're using the most effective and cheapest tool possible, which for many years was suppressed by Smokey Bear. They use a lot of fire. They have seasonal crews, about 8 or 10 seasonal crews that go throughout the entire state to burn parcels anywhere from just 20 acres to, they just finished up Tallulah Gorge. That was several thousand acres. And that's very helpful to the environment. It does harm the non-native exotics. It does kill them or sets them back tremendously. And it's one of the cheapest tools. You can burn 10,000 acres with 20 people.
I love the story of the longleaf pine success. They suppressed fire, and they were dying off because they needed the fire to open their pine cones and also to get rid of that undergrowth. Is that correct?
Yep.
Open up the pine cones so the seeds can germinate on bare soil.
Yeah.
I've been on a couple of hikes in longleaf pine forests about 2 weeks after a burn, and it's like a lawn of pine seedlings.
That's cool.
And then they start fighting each other for water and nutrients, and only one or two survive. But that's more than zero.
Right. Well, you mentioned a lot of the work that the Nature Center kind of does directly with, you said the Georgia National Plant Conservancy and some of the other organizations. I want to kind of close this out by asking, what can individuals do on a local level to kind of work in this sort of effort that you're a large part of? What groups can they join, or what can they just do at their house? Well,
there's many, many things they can do. Number one, they can come volunteer for me. Self-serving, I know, but they can come volunteer here, get their plant fix.
And get education. Yep.
Get the education. I love to teach my volunteers. Become a member of the Nature Center. Support us financially. The Georgia Plant Conservation Alliance has something called the Botanical Guardian Program, where you will be interviewed, you will be vetted by multiple people. For example, Scott, I would vet you. 2 other people can vet you and say, yes, he's an upstanding person, which we know.
Oh, excuse me.
That hurts. So once you're vetted, you're going to get interviewed by people from the DNR. You have to sign a non-disclosure agreement because you're going to be taken to sensitive sites. You're not allowed to go there on your own. You have to go with a group. You have to actually physically sign in on an app that you're going. What time did you get there? When are you leaving? We've had some poaching issues over the last couple of years, so we're trying to really stop that. It's heartbreaking when you have worked with a plant for almost 30 years, and then you go there and somebody had dug them all up.
Crazy.
That's what they're trying to prevent.
Of course.
But then you can get invited to these work days and work parties once you get vetted, once you get, sign your non-disclosure, and then you can get your rare plant fix from there. Collecting is not allowed. Revisiting sites is not allowed. Taking your friends from Europe there is not allowed. You just only with DNR personnel or Georgia Plant Conservation Alliance personnel are you allowed to know about those populations.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, a collective effort, it's kind of got to be a collective watch.
Yep. And for anybody out there that is thinking about poaching, they're employing more and more cameras, satellite cameras now.
Oh, yeah. Ooh, can't do anything without being on a camera these days. Even in the woods.
In the middle of nowhere, on top of a mountain in North Georgia, they've got 10 cameras directly linked to satellites.
Right.
Mostly what they catch is hogs digging up the plants.
Oh,
unfortunately.
Sad. Yeah.
Feral hogs.
Yeah. So do all your business in common plant areas, not near these rare ones.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very sensitive topic right now, and I hope that one day will come where people become a little bit more honest and respect the diversity that we're trying to protect and conserve.
Yeah.
But I've known people in the past that they don't want to buy the plants. They want to rip them out of the ground and say, I collected it.
Yeah. Well, we'll just, continue educating them, and hopefully they'll want to be part of the process, not the problem. All right. Well, heck yeah. Thanks for talking to us today, Henning.
Thanks for having me here today. I hope this was informative to the both of you.
It's been great visiting with you. Yes, always. Thank you.
Yeah.
I always learn things whenever I get to hang around with you.
Well, come on up more often to the greenhouse. That's my office up there.
True. That's right. That's your office up there now.
My most of the time office.
Yeah.
Right.
But I go home happy every day. I've got dirt under my fingernails. What can be better?
Yeah.
I hear you.
Thanks again.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Henning.
Well, that was very informative from our friend Henning. He is a wealth of information, isn't he?
He's always a good man to go to. All sorts of questions about plants and invertebrates.
No doubt.
Yeah.
What a hoot. And speaking of hoots, no, you don't like that?
No.
Jeremy doesn't like that. Welcome, Jeremy.
Hello.
You're here to talk about our barred owl, one of our rehab cases.
Yes, sir. Gentlemen, how you doing?
Well,
Fantastic. Before we get to the specific rehab case, why don't you tell our folks at home, what is an owl? I'm just kidding. We all know what an owl is. It's a nocturnal raptor who doesn't have movable eyes, turns its head 270 degrees any way it wants. But what makes the barred owl specifically?
Well, there's a lot not right of what you just said.
Okay, please inform me.
Actually, this species of owl that we're talking about, the barred owl, that is barred, B-A-R-R-E-D, not the barn owl. Those are two different species. But barred owls are actually what's called crepuscular, which
course.
means that they're not nocturnal, they're not active in the dead of night per se, but more dawn and dusk. So they're kind of two phases during the day rather than just nighttime or daytime.
Right.
So it's a little bit different for that reason, and actually that plays a big role into why we have a lot of barred owl rehab cases, because they're active when people are active at rush hour time in the morning when people are going to work. There's a lot of activity with owls during that kind of just lightning time, and then at twilight when it's just getting dark too. So they happen to have a lot of overlap in activity times with people, which is why they have a lot of injuries pertaining to people, unfortunately. So kind of an interesting thing.
That makes them unique as barred owls, where other owls are more nocturnal generally.
Yeah, so like the great horned
Okay.
owls, they're very nocturnal. You don't usually see great horned owls active when we're up and about and moving about. They're usually more in the dead of night when we're asleep.
And when we move from daylight into daylight saving time, that adds to the...
Absolutely. It plays
Yeah,
a huge role.
confusion.
It plays a huge role. When that time jumps that hour, it oftentimes puts us right in the active time for barred owls. So, like clockwork. There you go, Larry. Like clockwork.
You're a hoop.
We get a big influx of barred owl injuries from things like car strikes, because they happen to be very active at the time when everybody's commuting to work once that time changes. So we plan on it at the clinic that, hey, it's daylight savings next week. We're going to be inundated with some owls. We got to be ready for it.
Also hear of people, joggers, complaining about barred owls attacking them.
Yeah.
That's a different situation.
Yeah, and it's not really an attack. That makes it sound like they have a beef with these runners. That's not what's really going on. Again, since they are active at about the same time when a lot of joggers do so in the morning or in the evenings, during their free time, young barred owls will be staking out areas for kind of their territory, and they will take upon anything that they think is going to take into this newfound territory they have, and that may include joggers. So what they'll do is they'll fly down low and they'll swoop. I like to just colloquially say they'll drag their feet across somebody. They don't latch on, they don't grab, they don't attack per se. They just want to let you know, hey, I'm here, and you're not making me happy by being
Keep
here.
moving.
Yes, exactly right. So that does happen quite a bit with barred owls, and people get very uneasy about it because it's scary. When you don't hear an animal coming at you and it bumps you in the head, it's scary. But it's not really with a real gross malice that they're doing it. It's a lot more just kind of gesture.
Yeah, you're not their next meal.
That's another unique owl characteristic, is the complete silence in flight compared to almost every other bird.
Yeah, I actually watched an interesting video recently where they were recording birds flying, and the first thing they did was like a pigeon, and it sounded like a helicopter. It was just enormously loud. And then they had a hawk go, and then they had an owl go, and they had to check all their recording equipment because they thought it malfunctioned because they picked up absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Owls have a very specialized feather on their flights, on their wings, which it disturbs the boundary of the air in the feather, and it makes it so you don't hear the noise of that feather breaking through the air or the wind, and it makes it really, really silent. You could visually see the difference between those feathers. If you were, say, looking at any other bird and an owl, you could see the difference between the feathers that enables those owls to fly so silently. Being they hunt at night, where their prey might not be looking for them, more so hearing them, it's an invaluable tool for them for hunting their prey.
Yeah. Yeah, we often use the vulture feather compared with
which is definitely loud.
it's-
They don't have to sneak up on their prey.
No, they do not. Yeah.
But
But they're also, their wings are so velvety, but they're not water resistant.
No, so kind of the same type of situation. Should they become wet or should they become saturated, let's call it? A bird that's active during the day needs to avoid their predators during the day is going to have to dry off really quickly. Whereas an owl can take its time a little bit more. You know, it doesn't have that urgency to try and evade a predator right away. They can pick and choose their time and clean themselves off at their own pace, so to speak. So
Interesting. Well, owls do make a noise, even though not in flight. Let's hear it, Larry.
Who cooks for you? Who cooks for y'all?
yeah, that's the very telltale barred owl call is that who cooks for you.
And they also do the. Because I have a friend who said when she was a child, she used to go down and tell her parents there were monkeys fighting outside of her window, and it was barred owl.
They do. They make a number of different vocalizations. The one we hear the most in the clinic is when they're alarmed. We call it beak clacking, where they slap they slap their beak together really loudly, and it makes a loud like knocking noise.
I like how that's their intimidating noise.
It is. Well, compared to something like the barn owls make a set of noises that you
Horrifying.
it's chilling. It's chilling. It's alarming for sure. So.
Thanks.
That's my barn owl.
That's one of the many. Yeah.
Perfect.
All right, but
Yeah,
so
let's
we-
talk about our specific rehab case here. Case 240030.
Correct. Yes. So this is kind of an interesting case because it is unequivocally came into our care because of humans, but not directly. It's very indirectly. This bird was actually tangled up, trapped in a soccer net, just like a soccer goal has the netting in it.
Yeah.
And this bird was just tangled in it. And the person that found it called one of our colleagues, I'll call them, another association that called Georgia Wildlife Network, that they do a great job in explicitly going out and retrieving injured wildlife. They know how to handle it. They know what to do in these cases. They have a huge network of volunteers. And in this case, even more kind of fortuitously, they sent out one of their volunteers who happened to be a falconer. So he's very proficient in handling these birds. And in order to get it untangled from this net, he had to maneuver it quite a bit. So he was actually very, very lucky that he was the person that went out to address it. But it wasn't, like I said, not directly human involvement. It's not like
everybody
there was a
plays soccer.
you see them all the time. And
I see dogs play soccer.
But when they get tangled in it, again, an owl doesn't realize, like, oh, hey, take your time, just kind of unknot this, pull this, twist this. They just kind of panicked, and they just tangled themselves worse and worse and worse. And this bird, he caused quite a bit of soft tissue damage to one of his legs. And it does an interesting thing. When they get a lot of damage in their joints, it's what we call a frozen limb, where it just gets so swollen and seized that they can't utilize that limb properly at all. So he wasn't able to use one of his legs barely at all. We couldn't even manually manipulate it. It was that seized up from the edema and the swelling in there from that soft tissue trauma.
Does that have anything to do with, like, I guess, like the muscle to bone ratio in a bird? Because they have such...
Not necessarily. It probably had to do with more with the struggling. So sometimes, and the consequence of the struggling, the swelling that occurs in it. Certain animals can get, it's a very interesting condition. It's called myopathy, where if they overexert themselves, they can have some chemical problems in their muscles where the lactic acid builds up and it's an acid and it causes damage to the muscular tissue. That's not what happened in this case, thankfully, because oftentimes when that happens, it just causes a lot of medical problems. But he more than likely just overexerted and he got a lot of swelling, and the swelling put pressure on the tendons and the ligaments, and it just makes that movement disabled. We still went through the whole rigmarole of, fully examining him. We ran some x-rays on him to make sure there weren't any hard tissue issues, no broken bones, things of that nature. But he checked out okay on that. We started him on some medications, and then very quickly he showed some improvement, just minor improvement, but that was really valuable for us because we can then say, okay, we know we're heading in the right direction, and it might just take a little time. If we didn't see any improvement after 2 days, then we have to reevaluate what we're doing and try and pick another direction. Because,
see if there's something more than the leg.
Correct, or if we need a different medication, or if there's some sort of neurological problem, or who knows what.
Because you don't necessarily know how long he was out there either.
Not only that, but we don't know what's genuinely right. He's not telling us, hey, I got a headache. We're guessing. So we're taking very educated guesses, but the fact that we did see that improvement was incredibly valuable for us.
Right. So I heard that one of the things that you guys are doing to, once you see improvement and they start getting more closer to bird activity, including flying, that you're having them go through almost an obstacle course.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So particularly with cases like this, where this animal had a mobility impairment, we need to make sure he could fly okay before we can release him. If he can't fly well, he's not going to catch food, he's not going to evade predators, and we're not doing him any favors. Well, we kind of have a conundrum in how we're going to do that safely for these animals, because they may do well or they may not, and we don't want to hurt them more by testing them. So
right.
One of the cool things we do is, I'm sure everybody's seen those big foam pool noodles that you buy for your swimming pool. Mm-hmm. We tie a string through them, and then we tie them spaced out throughout our flight, and they hang down from the ceiling, and the birds have to navigate through them. And they're soft, so if they accidentally collide with them, it doesn't cause any more harm. It just but it also gives us a very visual and very easy to detect clue that this bird's capable of controlling its flight and its muscles properly, and so forth and so on. It sounds really kind of like we just made this up, hey, this is, but it's a real technique that we use just to make sure that they're ready to go. Yeah. Again, keep them safe while we're testing them. It's very important for us to do that. So if this bird happened to be able to, I can't make a joke for this one. He hit the ground running. He was able to navigate very well. Once that leg got its mobility back, he wasn't with us but a week before we determined he was able to be released. And then we were able to get him back out there. It was awesome.
Cool.
And part of it is also making sure they would catch live prey. Is that right?
That's correct. So, and we weren't too worried about it with this guy, being he wasn't with us for a long time. But certain animals do require a longer term of care, and particularly if it involved his senses at all, like his vision or his hearing or something, we need to make sure that he can still utilize those to catch live prey. So we have a large container that we can put some of their live prey in there with some pine straw and some obstacles. And they need to prove to us that they can catch them out, because if they can't catch food, again, we're not doing them any justice by releasing them back in the wild. Like I said, with this bird, he was only with us a short term. He was in good condition generally when he came in, so we knew he was eating well prior to coming to us. So
he was like a mature bird too. Seems
correct.
Like if they're younger and they get injured, it can be very interruptive for the growth process.
There's learning curves that these birds have that we try our best to replicate, but we can't replicate nature.
Of course.
So it's that additional hurdle is oftentimes a problem. A bird like this that is mature and has all his life skills and just has a relatively minor physical impairment that we can reverse, quick turnaround. Knock on wood, quick turnaround.
Well, good.
Always gratifying, though.
Correct. I can't stress this enough, how fulfilling it is to have a bird come to you that is so injured that it's letting people handle it, and you taking it back out there and opening the transport crate and watching this bird fly back into the woods.
Go for it.
Very fulfilling to see that full circle.
Oh, yeah.
So many of our raptors, they've been hit by cars. Is that the majority?
I would guess yes. I don't have any hardline statistics for you, but that seems to be easily the most common injury that we get from these birds when they come in.
But we have a program barred owl, a female, and her injury is also kind of not usual kind of.
Right. It's unrelated to cars, but related to people. And again, kind of like the soccer net case, not really directly, but unequivocally human. Our barred owl that we use for our program, who is a non-releasable bird, so she actually can't fly with the good navigation skills that we were talking about with this last one. She just isn't capable because she has lost the tip of one of her wings because a fishing hook got caught into it and the fishing line was wrapped around it and damaged that tissue so much that it needed to be medically removed. She's totally fine for it, no worse for wear, save for that area on her wing is what controls a lot of the bird's ability to fine-tune their controlled flight.
Yeah.
And as such, she did not have good flight navigation skills. She can still fly, it's just not as pretty as a wild barred owl.
Right.
So for that reason, she needed to be permanently housed because she could not be released, because of that lack of flying skills would impede her ability to do those necessary life skills, catch food, like I said, evade predators, find a mate, etc.
And she got caught on the fish hook because apparently some angler had gotten his line caught up in a tree limb. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's the case with her, but with barred owls are interesting owls. So like a great horned owl, which is a different species, is going to hunt a lot of prey. Like it's going to hunt skunks, it's going to hunt rabbits, it's going to hunt things like that. Barred owls they're almost like little trash disposals. They'll eat almost anything. They'll eat rodents for sure. They like eating rodents. They'll eat fish, they'll eat frogs, they'll eat invertebrates, they'll eat insects. They'll go for what's there. They're regularly times found a lot around watersheds, like around swamps or even, stagnant ponds, things of that nature.
Wetlands.
Yeah, wetlands, exactly, because there's a lot of potential prey in there. So we get a lot of barred owls with hooks caught in them that sometimes they're caught in their mouth, which is absolutely ironic, that an owl's caught on a fishing hook, but they're probably eating something that had a fish hook on it, being a fish, and that fish hook got caught. And luckily, again, even those are kind of grotesque injuries, they're relatively easy to treat, provided that it hasn't accelerated or infected or, progressed too much.
Right on.
So all sorts of fascinating features, but talk to us about asymmetric hearing in barred owls.
So that's a good point, Larry.
Oh, sorry.
Don't let it go to your head. Asymmetric hearing. So owls in general have superb hearing, very, very good hearing. And they oftentimes will listen for their prey a lot more than they'll necessarily look for it. And just like we have binocular vision using two eyes to kind of pinpoint a target, they can do the same thing with their ears, with their hearing. So this asymmetric hearing means that when a noise comes from a mouse rustling in the leaf litter 10 feet away, it hits their ears at slightly different times, like immeasurable to us as people. But the owls are able to detect, okay, it's hit at this distance, a little bit slower than this distance, so I know it's a little bit.
Triangulation.
Exactly, it's targeting with its hearing,
Yeah.
whereas we target more with our vision as humans. But the owls have this incredible ability to do so, to use their superb hearing. When we have our barred owls in hands, we can kind of part their feathers. Part of our exam is to look in their ears. And you part their feathers apart, and their ears, if you imagine a human ear that didn't have like the external part, their ears are probably about as big as ours. They have such a huge ear opening on their face. It takes up about half the total height of their face is the ear opening to just collect that noise coming in. Again, they don't have external ears like we do. That'd be kind of absurd, but they use their feathers to kind of open it up and be able to hear that noise. So it's pretty interesting, and it kind of a cool thing, maybe cool to some people. When we do that, when we kind of part those feathers and look in there to see their ears, we're looking for injuries. We're looking for, hemorrhaging or blood or, unfortunately, one of the external parasites oftentimes manifests itself in the ears. But when you're really looking at it, if you pay attention to what you're looking at, you could actually see the back of the eyeball in the ear itself. So you could, it's not like free floating, there's a membrane over it, but you could see it's certainly the shape of the eye. And if the eye does have any injury, you could see it on that backside. Thankfully, we don't see that too often, but it's kind of cool to see that eyeball on the backside through the ear.
Yeah, that's real behind the scenes stuff right there. Well, so yeah, you took this owl back to, it says here, Brookhaven. That's not too far away, and but we get owls and birds and everything from real far away sometimes. And, in great numbers. So luckily this one was close, but remember to everybody, we take them from all over. Yeah,
generally only from Georgia. So but we've driven 3 hours, 4 hours each way to release animals. That's a whole day of driving to release an animal. But we've done it. We do it every time we need to.
And it's important, though, when people bring animals into us, that they give us an idea of where they came from, because that's where we want to take them back to.
Yeah, particularly this time of year. I know right now we're in March. This is just when these owls are starting to nest, and that means that if we get an adult in, it's probably got a mate out there, and we're going to want to get it back with its mate. Should it be releasable? And these birds have territories. There's a lot of reasons we need to get that bird back home. So even though we have, beautiful grounds here, we can't just go and release animals on our property and say, oh, they're a bird, they'll fly to where they need to be. They need to go back home. So when we get in animals, we have an intake form, and one of the very important questions for us is, where exactly was this animal found? And sometimes people, God bless them, they're like, I don't know the address. I know it was on this road in front of the Pizza Hut. And then we have to get in Google and try and find the Pizza Hut on that road to find out where it is. And luckily, it's not that complicated sometimes. Sometimes people give us a numerical house address and say it was found on the, right here. But sometimes we get some pretty cryptic, this is the best I can do. It's found on this road at the mailbox shaped like an elephant. Okay.
Well, we're real glad this one got home safe, like the rest of them do. And thanks for your hard work as usual.
My pleasure.
Thank you for your time, Jeremy. Keep up the good work.
Yeah. All right, that's it for this episode of Your Place on the River, which is brought to you by Carriage Kia of Woodstock, Georgia, and features Chattahoochee Nature Center, where our mission is to connect people with nature. Each new episode is now released on the third day of each month. Until our next episode, here's something to ponder. You may have heard the phrase, leaves of three, leave it be, referring to our native poison ivy. And as that may be true, it is not a general rule because many plants have leaves of three. So here are three three-leaved plants. Of course, our poison ivy, native, beautiful, don't touch it. Kudzu, invasive, you can eat it, I don't suggest it. And then of course, we have the box elder, which is known as the poison ivy tree because it looks so similar to poison ivy. Perfectly safe though. Now, remember, to learn any more at any time about Chattahoochee Nature Center and what's happening here, please visit chatnaturecenter.org. That's CHATT naturecenter.org. We also invite you to share any questions, suggestions, concerns, or compliments about our podcast by tweeting us at CNC Nature and use hashtag YPOTR. Thanks.
This podcast is a production of BG Ad Group. All rights reserved.